Ready?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us for our our January board meeting. Wouldn't it be nice if it was May and it was spring out, but it
I
isn't.
wouldn't be
You'd be in the audience, right, Brian?
Yes.
Hope everybody had a nice holiday, and we did start at 5:30, and so the meeting was already called to order, but we are back. The first thing I need is approval of the minutes from our December board meeting.
So moved?
Second. Any comments or concerns about those minutes that you want to pass on? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda, and there might be one slight change. We have Eric Cass joining us at some point, right, Steve, in about 45 minutes or so? And when he comes online, he's going to zoom in. We will jump to his item at that point. So other than that, it will be as written.
Motion to approve with the adjustment.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I don't have any public comments.
Some of them came in.
Oh, yeah, I do have the ones that came in via email, but nobody that is here that wants to speak. We had some from the public regarding some of the resolutions, and when that item comes up, there are a few clarifications we're going to be making on the resolutions. Our students aren't able to join us, and
Are you our teacher rep tonight?
Yeah.
All right.
our teacher rep is here. I was just going to say our teacher, but thank you. And so I'm up to the teacher update, so you're on. So,
Wait, no, I'm here for the WTA.
Right.
yes.
Yeah, they usually give an update to the board, so.
Oh, we had nothing to share.
All right,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
there we go.
But welcome.
Just for fun.
There you go.
But we're glad you're here.
Okay.
Moving on to board reports, if there's anybody on the board that wants to share anything from the last month, things that they were involved in, did. I actually had the opportunity to go into the high school 2 different times. I was invited in to do interviews for the sophomore English class. They were to define a problem and then to state a solution to that problem in kind of a, formal way individually. And that was very inspiring. I love doing that and seeing the kids and how they prepare. So that was great. And I was also asked, and Mark joined me the day, our Future Educator Club asked us to come in and just speak about what it was like to be on a school board and our background, and that was amazing. Amazing. That was the day before our winter break, and the kids were so engaged. They asked the most amazing questions about what we do and how we chose to do this, and it was an engaging group. It was very great. So anybody else have anything to comment on? Okay, moving along to the WASB resolutions, which Katie will be taking care of at the state convention next week on Thursday. So we all received a copy of the resolutions, and in particular, there were a couple things that the public comments talked about, and there was a concern, and I guess I just thought it might be good, and I had also a question written here for Steve, if you don't mind. In the one resolution, 2303, which is about funding independent charter schools, can you speak a little bit about how charter schools are currently funded?
Sure. Just give me a moment to pull up something I can look at.
Okay, absolutely.
Real quick. You're welcome to look at any other ones if you want. Just take me a
Oh, we
minute.
just-
Okay, actually, and the other one was in reference to the I don't know what number that was.
The fourth exam.
Oh, yeah, the Fort, the reading test for educators that is being kind of recommended to not be used.
Yeah, so one of the resolutions, Tim, is some district put together a resolution that would eliminate the need for the fort exam as part of certification. So there was the feedback was that I'm just concerned with that going away. So I think what Joan is asking is, can you just give a little bit of background on what the fort exam is?
And kind of when it started, you know, it isn't part of my training at all, and when it started and kind of your view on its integrity.
So the first thing I'll say to kind of open is that there are different perspectives on this particular topic, even within the school and district leadership community. So I will do my best to provide you with an overview of it. If you ask me for my opinion, I'll be happy to give it to you, but it'll be my opinion, and it wouldn't necessarily reflect I couldn't say if there's a consensus viewpoint one way or the other. So you may remember early in the Walker administration, there was a blue ribbon task force, the Read to Lead task force. It was chaired by the governor, and actually our current governor, Tony Evers, was at that time state superintendent of public instruction. He was the vice chair of the task force. And actually, Dean Kaminsky, one of our principals, served on the task force. And so there are a set of recommendations, again, aimed at increasing policy proposals, increase the quality of reading instruction in Wisconsin, higher reading outcomes for Wisconsin students. One of those recommendations was to change the subject area reading test that pre-service educators had to complete for certain licensure areas from a praxis test to the FORT, the Foundations of Reading test. The FORT was considered a more rigorous test. At the time, it was in use in states like Massachusetts that had made noticeable gains in reading for students over the previous decade. Again, in Massachusetts, as in Wisconsin, FORT was just one piece of a set of policy changes. So starting in the 2014 year, in order to be licensed as an elementary teacher, grades kindergarten through 5th grade, there are a few different licenses that cover that. To be licensed as a reading teacher, to be licensed as a reading specialist, which is a more advanced reading teacher license, or to be licensed as a cross-categorical special education teacher, you had to pass the FORT exam. Now, for most other license areas in Wisconsin, you also have to pass a subject area test. Today, if you are applying for a license to be an art teacher, there's a Praxis Art test. There is a Praxis 2 Mathematics test. So the idea of a content area knowledge test for the license is not unique for the disciplines. And there had been a reading test prior to the FORT, but the FORT was considered more difficult. The FORT itself, the version up through the end of last year was the FORT 90. There's a revised version, the FORT 190, that this spring pre-service candidates will be taking across Wisconsin for the licenses. Both versions take a little over 4 hours to complete. Both versions have 100 multiple choice tests. There's some study guides out there. You can go look at the study guides. I think University of Milwaukee, of Wisconsin-Milwaukee even has a test app for this. I've heard that in meetings. And then there's 2 constructed responses you have to do. So it's a significant amount of time, as are some of the other content area tests. Now, where the different perspectives around this come on 2 different prongs. One is we have an increasingly short pool of teacher candidates in Wisconsin and indeed nationally. So anything that constitutes a requirement potentially leads to fewer candidates. And so the question always is, does a content area exam like the FORT or like the Praxis in other areas contribute to teacher quality in a way that then leads to more classroom performance or not. It seems intuitive to us that higher standards should lead to, higher quality teaching, lead to better student outcomes, but that's never really been demonstrated for any of these content area tests in terms of actual outcomes. It's not to say that's not true, it's just it hasn't, I would say, really been demonstrated with data. It also hasn't been disproven as a proposition with data. So there's that argument. The other argument is any of these tests require a certain amount of prior knowledge. The more knowledge you have going in, the more likely you are to excel, particularly on a multiple choice test where it's not all about getting everything right, it's about eliminating wrong answers. And so I noticed in the WASB resolution, one of the perspectives shared is that it may disadvantage candidates from different backgrounds that correlate with maybe different pre-experiences leading into the exam. So there's that argument with the FORT as well. But I would point out that for the FORT in 2019, there is an update to Wisconsin statute that while the FORT is still a requirement for cross-categorical special education teachers, there is now an alternative. So you can submit a portfolio indicating your mastery of the types of learning that the FORT is supposed to measure as an alternative to taking the FORT. So for cross-categorical special ed, there is a different route. It's still required without an alternative for the reading teacher and the reading specialist. I'm not really aware that there's any real debate in the field that it's not an appropriate test for being a reading teacher, the 316 or the 317. Where the debate really circles today is the FORT appropriate for the elementary classroom license?
So it says it's costly. Do you have any idea of the cost?
Well, with price changes these days, my knowledge might be old. I think it runs a $130 or $140. But to be fair, as a high school person, I would point out that you're taking an exam like that regardless of the content area. There's nothing special about the FORT in that regard. The FORT's not necessarily more costly than one of the other content area exams.
Okay.
So Tim, do teacher education schools around the state make this part of their graduation requirement, or is this something that when you graduate?
It's not a graduate. You'll complete your pre-service program, you'll complete your portfolio, but then to be fully licensed, you have to pass the FORT.
So if I'm an elementary teacher, knowing how much ELA is a part of that profession, should they have the training that FORT should be not a big deal?
So I guess what I would say, what the FORT is intended to measure is learning that we would expect all teachers to know. I think the question is 100 multiple choice question, 2 passages, is that going to be your most reliable measure? I think, it's important to recognize that with the FORT, you complete a pre-service program, and maybe there weren't in 2014, but certainly today there is a lot of test prep and study guides, a lot of support if you want to avail yourself of it before taking the FORT. I don't think that, I'm pretty sure that first-time pass rates on the FORT run in the 60 to 70% range, and they don't get a lot higher with retakes. And so these are people who have already completed their pre-service program and presumably have engaged in some test prep, and some of the CESAs have specialized programs for that as well. Now you hear that, and that sounds concerning, and it probably should concern us because it gets back to the larger question of, are these content area exams appropriate? But I will tell you that the first-time pass rate for exams like art and mathematics is much lower than the FORT. So your resolution is on the FORT, but the FORT is not really any more burdensome than any of these other examinations. However, our biggest single classification of teachers is elementary. And so anything that's reducing your elementary pool is of concern, no matter, how good the purpose. Special ed, and I see Tiffany's joining me, is in very short supply. There's an alternative to the fort today, but again, that's still a requirement.
Yeah, I was just gonna add my 2 cents on that, being a person that I have all my coursework done for a PhD in language and literacy, and have taken the test and have taught at the elementary level for many years, and it's the gamut, so it's every single thing you need to know from pre-K all the way up to middle school, high school. So depending on what your experience was in your student teaching and what level of students you're working with, if you're working with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, you're not focused in on the knowledge of what a pre-K early literacy focus is and what the best route is towards that. So, and I've taken the fort, and as a person who I feel like has a lot of experience with literacy, I think I had 87 out of 100 correct. So I've seen people have to take it 4 and 5 times. I believe it's something that you can learn on the job, and it's a lot more valuable to learn from your colleagues and from great professional development like we offer here. That's just my personal 2 cents, so.
Thank you.
So is the alternate assessment, does that satisfy the state license requirement? Like
For special education only.
Okay.
It won't for reading teacher, reading specialist, and I don't think that's really where the debate is. There's no alternative pathway for any of the elementary teaching licenses, though.
So can you get around that through special licensure?
So you're saying like taking one of the ABCT. I would have to go and see how the ABCT path would work for that. I can even have that answer later in the meeting, but I can tell you this.
I don't think it does allow you to opt, it doesn't give you an end around it, I don't believe.
Katie, do you have any other questions about that, or?
No, I do not have anybody else.
I think that helps my background
thank
to
you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And then,
Kick back to Steve.
Steve, yeah, did you have any information on the funding of charter schools?
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for just giving me a minute to pull it up. So just to share our district's numbers, we have 4 students that are Waunakee Community School District students attending an independent charter school this fall. Last year it was 5, and before that it was 2. So what happens with those students, because we don't know who they are, the state knows who they are. The state will put a student count into our revenue limit formula and populate the number of students attending one of these schools. So as an example, they went into our formula this year and said it was 4. So the revenue limit formula has a 3-year average of student enrollment. So the students that are attending these schools become a part of the revenue limit formula. Our revenue limit formula is about $11,000 per student. Independent charter schools are paid this year about $9,300. It is a minor issue for a district like us that has very few students participating in an independent charter school. My guess is Katie will probably hear from the districts or the region that advance this as to why this is more of a financial issue for them. And I think that's something you'll run into at the convention is the districts or regions who are bringing these forward will explain why something impacts them more than others throughout the state. But the resolution is asking for the numbers not to flow through the state revenue limit system, but for the state to pay for them up front because the local school board didn't approve the charter school. So I think that's probably their main concern is that the school board doesn't approve the independent charter school, yet the students attending are inserted into our revenue limit formula. which I assume is what you're going to hear from those districts, that they view that as problematic. So they're advocating for these students to be paid right off the top, basically. But in our particular situation, it would be best to be viewed as a very minor issue.
Thank you.
Steve?
So I know those two concerns came up from the public. Was there one other one?
This one just about social issues.
Yeah.
The social issues one.
Okay.
2312.
I had not even, I hadn't gotten that email, must have come into my box late, so I don't know if anybody wants to make any comment on 2312, adding underlying language, deleting.
Seems more of a semantics than
Yeah.
a large issue.
So are there other, I know Katie, you've gone through them. Are there other concerns or recommendations that you want to send with Katie as she attends the convention? We can do it tonight. You can do it individually to Katie over the course of the next week. Many of us will be at convention. We can chat about things if things come up. It's actually a very interesting process, and I think you'll learn a lot about other issues around the state and districts around the state.
Well, I think one of the things is WASB's trying to present what they view as the best interest of education at large. And, to that respect, with 2303, with the charter, doesn't affect us
Right.
a great deal. It does affect us, and I would agree, from my personal position, I think as a school board member, it makes sense for the best interest of schools that you not be taking local money at the district's expense and versus from the state. If we're going to have the charter schools and they're going to be supported, let it be from a separate fund and not penalize the local districts whose students do go, because that money's gone and their ability to provide their resources are diminished.
Katie, do you have any questions as you?
No, but as you read through these further, feel free to contact me with your feedback.
Yeah.
I believe the meeting takes place on Thursday morning, so, yes.
Thank you for
Thank
doing
you,
that.
thanks for reviewing those with us.
And thank you for filling us in on a few things, Tim and Steve. Okay, moving on to spring election update and items. I think everybody has received this information, but officially there will be two names on the Westport, City of Middleton, City of Madison election. Myself, Joan Ensign, and Zach Jensen will be running for that office, and for the Village of Waunakee seat, Nicole Green and Dawn Hendricks. And I just want to thank those individuals for going through that process, and the whole election process is important for democracy, so thank you.
I guess one comment that I've got before we move off of that is, if the teachers union is going to do the candidate forums and so forth, they don't use, school resources.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
So I think your point was school email, school Zoom accounts, those things. Is that what you're talking about,
That's
Jack?
correct.
Okay.
I applaud them for doing it, but, the candidates can't use that. So.
Okay. Fair enough.
Thank you.
Before you, Rebecca, is there something on the second part of that agenda item? You need the exemption for filing campaign finance reports. You need that from everybody?
Yes, that gets renewed every year, even like Joan, you still need to fill one out because it covers you from January
Oh, so what I filled out with my paperwork
Right.
isn't, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
So even the folks that aren't running need to fill that out, so
Yeah.
that what's attached there, so.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so get those to, please get those to Rebecca.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna throw that away, Rebecca, thank you.
You bet.
So reviewing the timelines for board superintendent evaluation process, I think everybody received the school perception survey number, login number. If you haven't tried that, please do, and if you have trouble, let Rebecca know. The other evaluations, we received hard copies in, but you're going to follow up with electronic copies?
Yep.
Correct? At our next meeting, Randy's going to go through an update on our priorities before we fill out his evaluation and the evaluation of the priorities. And we want to schedule an evaluation meeting, and I actually would like to do that tonight at the end of our meeting, is to schedule that meeting on our evaluation. So that's kind of our timeline for that process. Any questions? So, discuss and review community engagement schedule and topics. I know this came up last month, and Randy, you're gonna.
Yeah, I just wanted to
talk about
kind of
that.
make sure we keep this piece going. I think what we discussed from my lens was that we wanted to do an engagement program around social emotional learning, student mental health. Looking at a timeline for that, I'm recommending we do something in March or April. And what I would also like to, and I think, Jack, you brought this up and we discussed this at a little bit, was obviously it'd be something that'd be open to anybody who wanted to attend, but also have some targeted invites from each of our board members. So I think what we did in the past was if everybody could kind of pull together like 10 people, that then we can send out personalized invites to kind of, so if you just want to think about kind of 10 individuals that you think would be interested and good people to have and represent our community in a discussion, then we can get those to Rebecca. And then what we will do is we will once we have our date and our program set, we will send an invite specifically out to them, inviting them to the event. So if we're looking in that, go ahead, Jack.
No.
I was thinking of sometime in March or April for that, and we can probably do that at the end of our meeting here when we start scheduling some of our other special meetings.
Okay.
But does that seem in line with what we talked about last time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Committee meeting, starting with the budget committee. Jack or
Steve, I'll turn it over to you there.
Thank you, Jack. So you notice we put a note in board book that under the budget committee meeting itself, there's no action items. Later on in the agenda, we do have a couple of action items that were discussed at the budget committee meeting. One of them is the second phase of the borrowing for the November referendum, and one of them is open enrollment approvals for the following school year. At the budget committee meeting, we did take quite a bit of time and work through the document that we attached in the board book, which is the preliminary draft look at the 23-24 planning process. One item did come up during the budget committee meeting that we thought it would be good to get initial feedback from the other board members. At Prairie Elementary School, right now in kindergarten, we have 22 students on average in all 5 of the sections, which means that if we plan ahead for next year with the same 5 sections, Prairie Elementary School for first graders in effect will be closed off for anyone moving into the community between January and September. We do have openings though at Heritage Elementary School. So within the 3 elementary schools, we are still within the school board class size policy, but we would not be at Prairie Elementary School. So it's just important to take a look at that as board members and share your perspective as we move forward. It's a draft planning process, so no action is being taken on this. But I think I'll turn it over to the board members on the budget committee to share any thoughts, and then any other board members who are welcome to weigh in. The plan is to then bring back the next version of this in February for review by the board. So as board members on the committee, feel free to share your thoughts.
Being on that committee and looking at the initial numbers and as they, presented, starting the budget at maximum for first grade, I think is difficult for that school. There's new development, if you go down Cop Road, there's all kinds of building going on there. Those kids would be asked to attend a different attendance area. I personally would like to put an additional first grade teacher there so we wouldn't have to close that attendance area at this time. Plus 22 is such a hard number for first graders as they, start their formal education in reading and all those subjects. Optimal, remember, is 20, so if we could skim it back down, I just feel it's better for kids.
And I share that perspective. When you look at the numbers, as some of the other schools, you're looking at an average of 19.5 in the kindergarten, first grade level, and that 2 or 3 students makes a huge difference in how much you do one-on-one. And to start the year at 22, I feel much more comfortable making room for another FTE for a first grade teacher there, and go forward with that. That would still allow them 2 schools actually for move-in students versus just one, and still keep the numbers below 22.
Right, because Arboretum, what is Arboretum at, 20 or 21?
Rebecca, would you mind calling that up?
I don't think that one's full of Arboretum.
And if you want to scroll through, please.
On page 3.
Right there, so you can see.
That's the
Arboretum.
22, 23.
Oh, yeah, if you want to move
We
that,
need to
thank
go
you.
to the 23,
Keep
24.
going. Great. And you can keep going.
Yeah,
The right
right
There we
there,
go.
right. So,
So
yeah,
next year's
Arboretum is
first,
at
yeah.
20.
Yep.
So is Arboretum maxed out this year at 22 for first grade?
Yes.
It has been, yeah. The Arboretum often maxes out in some of their classrooms. It's a 4-track school.
Yep.
So it has been, and then we've moved kids to other areas. I think to do what Joan is saying would then drop the average class size at Prairie down to like 18, as opposed to
To
22.
start.
To start with, and then any move-ins would be on top of that, or any transfers.
And the other thing we talked about is because they have been maxed in kindergarten and there may be students that have been pushed out of that school to another, district school. They could be invited back to their attendance area if we did that. And I'm not sure how many you were going to kind of look at, and I'm not saying you needed to have that information
It's
tonight.
2
but-
so far, and
Two.
the third one next month.
Okay, so there are a few kids that we may be able to bring back to Prairie. Anyway, just,
You're just looking for feedback, Steve,
Feedback, if
for
anybody-
your next iteration of the budget. Okay.
anybody have
Sure,
any?
we were, as a committee, but we wanted some impact.
If anybody had strong feelings, keeping it,
I would support getting another FTE there and keeping the class small. I think that's important.
How many paras do we have in those sections?
I think we have, help me out, I'm looking to Brian in the back, and I'm just trying to think of, we have 1 para per every 2 classrooms
It's not one every per.
No.
We know that.
We're-
That's probably
A little high.
That's 1 per 2 is probably too high a ratio.
All right.
It would be smaller than that. I
All
don't,
right.
I've never seen a breakout per classroom. It's per building.
Yep.
The staffing hours are set up per building.
Yep. We-
And how they're distributed out.
We can bring back kind of what our hours are per building to the next budget committee, so you can see it as we bring that forward. Yeah.
I guess we were just looking at if anybody had strong feelings of not making that extra section. There's definitely room at Prairie. They have 6 classrooms. We're only utilizing 5.
And then the long-term plan would be that that teacher would follow, or a teacher would follow that class because of the budget.
It would follow through, and then I'm sure as that, and that's, Dean Kaminsky talked to me about that today, as far as that he'd probably see it then bounce to the next year. Then by the time you got to 3rd grade, then the class size goes up, but you'd probably, the teacher would probably then have a position somewhere else to
Right.
transfer them around.
And that's something I think we have done in other buildings
Absolutely.
before. So
We
this
have.
wouldn't be a new concept.
No.
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 So I think there's definitely value in having smaller class size.
And are those boundaries all pretty absolute? I mean, with how the growth is going, are they like looked at differently in any way?
Yeah, that was a conversation we had at the budget committee as well. I think we've tweaked our boundaries over time. A full-scale boundary change, we haven't done in a long time since Arboretum was done. We did with the new subdivisions came in, like when Westbridge came in and when Kilkenny came in, we had some flex times for a period. I mean, I would recommend that the next time you do a full rebounding is when you add an elementary school, because then you're going to have to redo the whole thing. I mean, I guess my concern about doing anything of that before then is you're going to have multiple iterations and disrupt
Right.
families multiple times in a short period of time. So I think the time to do it is going to be when you have another elementary down the road. But yeah, that right now what we do, Ted, is that as a section gets full and people move in, we have to communicate to them that we need to, that's what our shuttle system does. It moves them to another school that has more space. We try to keep families together, but if sometimes families choose to split their kids, we've had that as well.
Heritage Hills, is that designated right now for Heritage or Prairie?
Prairie.
And that's filling up. I mean, those homes are being
A lot.
peopled.
Right. There's a lot of, yeah, and the apartments that are going up there
But
too.
Kilkenny is for Heritage, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've heard from Mark Roffer is that when the apartments go in, we don't necessarily pick up a lot of
Right.
kids.
Right.
And if you look at Heritage Hill, that first section is all workforce, or a lot of that is workforce housing.
Right.
When they start moving into the next phases of that, it's going to be, you know, it's not necessarily workforce
No.
housing.
No, I think the question's going to be is like when as you look at some of the apartment buildings that have come around, they're market-based housing, they're market-based apartments. So as we have ones that fall within where they have some subsidization that can help to reduce some of the costs for families based on income, I think some of the ones over by McDonald's have some of those aspects to it. Will that change how many kids we see? And Dean Kaminsky asked me that question today of how the ones in the Heritage Hills subdivision are being categorized. And I'll find that out, but that's going to be your distinction, because we have some kids, but we don't have a lot of kids coming out of that market rate housing. It's going to be if you have something that allows for other incomes to kind of be in that, to find a way into the housing, then I anticipate we'll see more kids.
Because those other houses that are going in are probably going to be closer to $4.99 or.
Yeah, they're going to keep going up the further you get up the hill. So there's also, I believe, as part of that subdivision, there's some like I believe there's some retirement housing in there too, if I recall.
So, Steve, do you kind of have what you need? Thank you. Moving on to policy committee.
Policy, we continue to go through the 300 series, which is student instructions, and we have about a handful of policies to, that we'd like to have a motion on tonight. I think I'll turn to Randy, if that's
Right.
possible.
I think what we've done in the past is we've just taken them each on an individual basis, and we'll share with you what our recommendation was out of the committee. The first one is the homework policy. We obviously feel that homework's important, but we don't believe that it needs to be in the policy, into the board's policy book. This is actually an item that we do have within our parent-student handbooks. So our recommendation at this point would be to repeal the homework policy because it's something that we feel best resides within the handbook setting as opposed to the board policy.
And if you do go to our new website, you can see you can go into the handbooks, and really the wording is pretty, in some of it, it's more right on, like the other ones, but it captures everything that's in there.
Motion to support.
Second?
Any other comments, concerns, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is the promotion and retention of students policy. And this policy had a lot of legislation around it several years ago. And right now we're at a point where we're revising it. And what we are requesting to do is to keep the existing policy and not use the PRG's policy. We just felt that the language we had in ours and the processes we had in ours felt that fit our needs the best. However, when we take a look at the exhibits, I think there's 5 different exhibits. We want to keep the first one and repeal exhibits 2 through 5. We just don't feel that those are ones that need to be in policy or just aren't reflective of what needs to be there at this time. So we're recommending that we keep the existing policy and Exhibit 1 and repeal exhibits 2 through 5.
Motion to keep existing policy in Exhibit 1 and repeal Exhibits 2 through 5.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
The next item is actually one we don't need to have action on, but I'm going to just tell you where we're at. This is the acceleration policy, and we are looking to just keep this policy as is. So there's no action needed on that one. The next item is the high school graduation requirements. We are looking to adopt the PRG. And one of the things that we added into this one is we have a few things that are just unique to us that we wanted to make sure were clearly articulated. First of all, state law requires you to have a half a credit of health. A quarter of our credit is received while you're at the middle school and a quarter credits at the high school. So we wanted to articulate that clearly here. We also have an additional requirement for the career workshop, which is a quarter credit. So those are reflected within the policy, the PRG policy. And then we also had language on page 4 of 5, which I believe is ones that Tiffany added with regards to special education.
I guess the question I've got here is, we struck early graduation may be permitted. What's the rationale? If the kid, we've had several early graduations for good reason.
It's actually in the policy, Jack, that allows for early graduation. It's under the distinction of the high school principal to do that. Which page are you looking at?
I was attendance and participation. It's on page 1.
Okay. Yep, and when you look on page 3,
It says the principal may.
yeah, the principal may do that. So one of the things you're going to see, early high school graduation is actually a policy we'll get to in just a minute. We're actually going to repeal that policy because the early graduation provisions are given to the high school principal within this policy. so it does maintain that.
So with that, if the student has met the requirements, shouldn't that be a shall grant versus may grant?
I think there's other criteria that they're also looking at that when they do the early graduation. So I think there's some other pieces that they're like, what are your, it's not solely just a credits-based piece, because there's a lot of kids that have credits that are based off of that. I think it's also trying to see a bigger picture of what their plan is, what their educational plan is, and kind of why they want to request early graduation. So I think there's a larger conversation around it. Usually, I think we do grant it, but we're working with parents, and then at that point, you have kids who are 18 who can make some of their own decisions.
Okay, we'd be looking for a motion.
Motion to approve recommendations?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The next item is this recognition and honors that are held for, that can be worn at graduation. And what you see is that we've just articulated really what cords can be worn, and the Laude cords is one that we wanted to make sure that we added in there. A question that came up at the policy committee meeting, which I asked Tim to look into, was are there other cords or things for things like National Honor Society, which are our programs, and how are those seen within there? So Tim, can I just have you give a quick update on kind of the recognition piece? Because right now what we're stating is the Laude cords and the grade point average cords are the ones that we're going to allow and not allow any others.
Right, and, we spent a little time on this at the policy committee meeting, and I think the question came, do you get a cord for National Honor Society? And I think where this concept comes in is that the minimum GPA requirement for Honor Society is a 3.6, and then there are additional steps in the selection process. The gold cord also comes with a 3.6 GPA. So any student in Honor Society is also going to have a gold cord because the gold cord comes with a 3.6, and that is one of the criteria for Honor Society. But it is not exactly an Honor Society cord.
Right.
So the kids don't if they're a National Honor Society, do they wear a cord for National Honor Society?
No.
They don't?
Not for National Honor Society,
Okay.
but the overlap is pretty significant between the 3.6 gold cord and the National Honor Society.
Right.
They have a pin,
Yeah.
but there's no cord for Honor Society directly.
Right. I just wanted, I'm the one who brought that question up, so appreciate you, Tim, just looking into that. So the changes we have here reflect what our current practice is. We also took out and struck the language of creating a seniors awards night, because we've had one of those, and that's an annual event that we have every May.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Right. And the last one we have is the early high school graduation policy. This is incorporated in the previous policy that we already approved, 345.6. So the early graduation policy we're going to repeal because that language will be embedded into another policy.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Great, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's all.
That's all we have.
That's all for policy. Policy was short this
We
month.
did. I think we don't meet the rest of the month. We meet in February again, and then we will.
Then we'll have a whole bunch.
continuing
Christmas
over.
vacations.
They got some good ones on the docket for you.
Yeah, we're working. It's-
All right, moving on to curriculum.
For the curriculum committee, there's nothing, no action needs to be taken. We do have the school curriculum presentations that are coming up, and I can't remember what the date is, but
Last Monday of the month.
it's 3 weeks
30th
from
of
tonight.
January.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so the minutes are listed here if anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
I guess one of the things that came up in the listening sessions, as we were going through the listening sessions, is the number of enrichment classes that we've got. And I guess.
Scheduling them.
And scheduling those, enrichment classes, or however we want to determine. Is there any way that we could potentially review if there's overlap between one or the other.
What do you call an enrichment class? I'm confused.
I
Elective
think,
courses.
I think one of the points that was just brought up with us approving these new these new courses, is it ever brought to your attention that it conflicts with the scheduling and how, what was the term for, I wrote it down in those notes though.
Yeah, it's
A single threaded, is that what?
Yeah,
Singleton.
yes,
Singleton.
Singleton.
At the high school.
Yes,
Yes.
at the high school level. And how it's really difficult to get that schedule to work out, just with the fact maybe no more on the Singleton side. And it's something to consider, like when you're thinking of approving new courses, it really adds a challenge to that.
In the past, those issues have been resolved before it gets to committee.
Yeah.
In the past, it's gone before the
Department chairs.
the curriculum heads at the high school and in the department, and also with the principal. And if it comes to us, Johnny, that problem has been worked out, or would it be offered as something for us to approve?
I guess
I don't know if that's changed.
No, that's still accurate, Mark.
what I would challenge, the chairs to take a look at that, because it's becoming an issue from a scheduling standpoint, and I don't know why it's more of an issue now than maybe it was, in the past, but it seems to be more and more of a challenge as we put in more and more electives.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a matter of, are there similar electives? Maybe they're not exact, but are there similar, where we can start bundling, some of that curriculum to ease the burden on the scheduling issue, and still getting similar results.
Yeah. And maybe it's when we can get a little bit better understanding of what the concern was, so that we can follow up and determine. Because you're going to have singletons no matter what you do. That's just part of offering a robust curriculum at the high school. But if there's a question about that, you're offering classes that overlap with each other. I guess we'd have to have a little bit more clarity as far as what you're looking at, and then we can bring that back through.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Moving on to administrative reports, open enrollment, capacity recommendations. Steve, are you taking that for us?
So we did review this topic in the budget committee meeting. During the month of January, state law does require school boards to approve the number of open enrollment capacity or spots available at each grade level for the following year. What then happens is the open enrollment period is opened up for the public. The public is then aware of what a decision has been made by a school board, but then can choose to put in applications, and then eventually in the month of May, they come back to you. Just a quick note, we had talked earlier about first grade next year at Prairie and whether we're gonna add a section or not. Last year, we had a parent file an appeal on our decision for open enrollment because we added a section after January. The DPI upheld the decision made by the school board because of the fact that you were following the policy in January as it existed. So just keep in mind that we do the best we can as of what the situation is right now in January. Changes that are made throughout the spring are then supported in the event, by the DPI, in the event that a parent chooses to appeal. We have a couple of attachments in the board packet. One of them was calculated by Tiffany, so she created a calculation on special ed capacity, and the other calculation is regular ed capacity, and they do have to work together. So when a student does apply, the family will indicate whether or not there's an IEP, and then we check both lists, so to speak. We will check to see, was there an opening in the classroom, and then is there also space availability in special ed, so they work together. I'm gonna ask Rebecca just to open up the first attachment, the one called open enrollment capacity, that one, thank you. So what you're looking at, on the left-hand side are the calculations for open enrollment capacity based on our current student attendance right before the winter break. So if you take our current student enrollment, move them forward one grade, you would have the open enrollment capacity under the column that says open, which is the 5th column over to the right. The whole second set of numbers to the right-hand side is using our budget projection model for enrollment at each of the grade levels, and then looking at open enrollment capacity. So a good example would be 7th grade. If you look at the left, based on the number of 6th grade students we know today, the number of openings, if you follow 7th grade across, you would see the number that says 30. If you go to the right, you would see our budget projection model, which assumes 8 students moving into the district between now and next September. That reduces the number of openings from 30 down to 22. Administration is recommending using the more conservative open enrollment number from the 2 different approaches. So as an example, in 7th grade, we would recommend going with the 22 as opposed to the 30. And so the recommendation would be to use the numbers that are highlighted, which are the lower of the 2. So if you compare each of them, that's the approach you would take. The school board preferred a similar approach last year. If you were to go back and look in the board packet last year, Jack, you were on the budget committee, recommended that we take that approach. So we followed the same approach this year. We did ask for Tim's help on the middle school. There is a half team moving from 8th grade to 7th grade because of the shifts in enrollment. So we did update the information from what was included in the budget committee packet. Tim did talk about the topic of homeroom with the committee. That may be a future topic for the policy committee to take a look at, as we are not defining homeroom in board policy as a class, which does result in larger homeroom class sizes in 7th and 8th grade. So that may be something that the committee may want to look at in the future. But for now, you would see the 2 sets of calculations. The recommendation is to go with the numbers highlighted in yellow, which are the conservative between the 2 approaches. Jack, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's the prudent approach as we go forward. So I would make a motion to recommend the open enrollment as presented.
Second.
Okay. Any questions on what's happening with that? All in favor of accepting that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for presenting that. So we're ready for the resolution, and Eric's not here yet.
Rebecca's in yet? Okay. Is it possible to circle back to this in a few minutes?
Yeah.
You can text him and see where he's at.
Sure.
Sure.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll just text him and see where he's at real quick.
Yeah. He's kind of the end of the show. We're down to consent agenda.
Let's knock it out.
Actually, we could do consent agenda while you're kind of checking on
Sure.
that. Sure. So, moving on to consent agenda. as you're thinking about whether you want to pull anything out other than Randy's letter, I don't know if we can pull that.
Sure.
No, just kidding. There are two gifts that I'd like to acknowledge from Demco. A value of $600 in chairs for our Prairie School. And from the Mefford family, the Pride Pump donation, which is a district-wide need donation of another $1,000. I want to thank them each for those generous donations. There is a short-term exchange student in there.
Can I just speak to that for a second?
Sure.
This is just kind of a unique one with the short-term exchange student. This is actually a group of students from France who are going to be here just for a few weeks. Probably doesn't need to come to the board. It's really not clear if it is an exchange group, so it's more just an FYI to you. So I just decided to put it into the consent agenda. I think it's a great opportunity. Our staff are going to be supporting that, and we think it's a good opportunity for the students from France and certainly for our students to kind of experience that culture too. So.
Okay, so if anybody wants to make a motion on the consent agenda, we can get that out
Motion
of the way.
to take the entire thing at once.
Second?
Move that we support all the recommendations.
Okay, and we have a second on that. Any questions, anything you want to ask about out of the consent agenda? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And with that, we'll move back to the resolution of $99 million.
Rebecca, when you get a chance, could you pull up the information that Eric emailed earlier today? And just as Rebecca's pulling that up, at the December board meeting, we did share with the board and requested feedback on the 2023 portion of the borrowing related to the November referendum. If you recall, the board gave feedback to look for flexibility in the second round of the borrowing, to look at an approach that is based in a note, a 5-year note, as opposed to a 20-year bond. The rationale for that is was to look at the lower interest rates that were available on a note, to provide the board with the flexibility at any time past the first year to be able to, in effect, refinance that note into a 20-year bond. So the issue of the note will be back in front of the board at some point in the future when the decision is made as far as the right timing for it to become a bond issue. So the sale took place today. Eric is going to jump in to us via Zoom. He's at another school board meeting tonight as well, so balancing a couple of different meetings. And Eric's going to review the results of the sale that took place today. Eric, are you able to jump in? See him there.
That's all of us.
Just text him quick.
I'm not sure if the audio is working or not.
I think it's the audio. He was able to hear us, but we can't hear him.
You can hear us, Steve, sorry.
Yep. Oh, I think he just got it.
Can you hear us now, Eric?
certainly call him as well.
Did that work at all?
Yep,
Yeah, there we go.
Just gotcha.
Yep, very good, thanks, Eric.
Yeah, would you like me to start my video, or is it okay? I'm in my car at a quick trip, so I apologize.
That's all right.
I'm
Eric,
happy to turn on my video.
so Eric, what we have up is the presentation that you
Yep.
emailed today. Would you mind walking the board through that?
Not at all. And I was able to hear your intro, Steve,
Oh,
so
okay.
I think Steve kind of hit the nail on the head, just circling back with the strategy that we're looking at. And I'm going to walk through some of the highlights in terms of where interest rates were, which you're seeing on the screen here, and a couple of the other key pieces, the results, which we're very pleased about as it fits into the plan and the overall property tax levy and debt management for the school district. The one other key piece that I think I just want to highlight as it relates to the 5-year issue that's in front of you this evening. Steve is exactly right that at some point in time, the school board will need to take further action to refinance this into longer-term bonds. But also after year one, during that interim period until such time, the school district has the ability to kind of pay off at its leisure any amount of principal, which kind of fits into your overall levy management strategy that's been in place for many years. And I'll highlight that when we get into the total plan. So what we're looking at here is a 1-year look of a 5-year maturity, which we're talking about, and some of the volatility that's been happening. When we first started this post-November referendum, you can see November of 22 was the high point. And so we were estimating this 5-year issue at that point in time would be right around 4%. What you've seen happen on this graph is a softening of those rates in this 5-year window on the short end of the yield curve, down to 2.36, which is in the market today. That 2.36 doesn't exactly equate to what you're going to receive or any entity is going to receive. It's simply a benchmark, but it's a good indication when we look at trends as it relates to interest rates. So this graph is really going to graphically show you the story of where we came on interest rates here in the next slide, Steve. So the bid tabulation here, so we did a competitive sale at 10 a.m. for the full $99 million, a period of 5 years with a 1-year call that we talked about. We're very pleased with the results. You can see JP Morgan Securities LLC is the recommended winner at 3.25%, roughly 75 basis points below where we expect it to be. And you can see that B of A Securities and Robert W. Baird were a little bit higher, but a really tight window right there at the top 3, and then it spreads out up into Wells Fargo, who's closer to like 5% at most. Next slide. Some of the highlights for your consideration this evening. This is for the $99 million. This is the second phase. If you recall, in December we did sell just short of $10 million. They qualified to lock in the first round of financing, which was a 20-year issue. Funds will be deposited if approved on February 1st, 2023. Principal maturity dates, which we'll show you a little bit on the full plan. The first payment is April 1st of 2024, and there is no required principal payment until 2028. So it's set up with one $3 million principal payment in the first year, and then no required payments, but the school district can pay what they would like towards principal to pay that down as low as possible if that's a strategy that makes sense as this continues to develop. The first interest is October 1st, and as we've talked about, the remaining balance, which will be $96 million, is all callable on April 1st, 2024. So rates after April 1st, 2024 can be locked in long-term, or again, it can be prepayable. The S&P rating maintained at a AA-, and I'll show some of the highlights here on the next slide. There is no insurance and no enhancement needed. And you can see that our projected interest rate dropped from 3.96 to 3.25, which equates to about $3.5 million of property tax levy or interest savings on this specific issue over the next 5 years. Next slide. I found this interesting. I cut out some snippets. So the district is new to S&P. This is the second rating they've gone through. If you recall, we made the strategic move to S&P for the first issuance because of the double downgrade from Moody's, and it's certainly paid off with having an upgrade in comparison to Moody's. Another key point is the outlook is stable, so that's a key indicator, that second bullet point under credit highlights. And then you can see a little bit of color as there is more debt to issue that I'd like to share. is a downside scenario that they lay out is if the school district continues to dip into the reserves over the next few years as we continue to issue debt, that could be a negative piece to your rating moving forward. And also on the upside, as we always continue to look for ways to enhance your rating, you can see a little bit of color there on the upside scenario, although, as they say, it's a little bit unlikely with where the current rating is at the AA-. Next. Apologize again for the size, but there's a lot going on with the district. Existing debt's on the far left. You can see, if you zoom in a little bit here, really what we're talking about is that $99 million block right there. And as I alluded to, the structure is $3 million payable the first year, and then nothing is required to be paid until 2028. But the underlying strategy, as I continue to stress, is that any additional levies over the next few years as we look to manage a mill rate and a total property tax levy would be part of that strategy to begin to pay that down. And if and when we do pay that down, then $96 million would be decreased, and the long-term interest associated with this 5-year issue would also decrease. You can see laid out there, which these will certainly change, is an issue in 2024 based upon your cash flow, and then the final, just short of $10 million, would look to be issued in 2025, again, matching your cash flow. The last thing I would highlight is around the far right. You can see that your Fund 39 debt levy, existing plus new, that's an important column in working with Steve to make sure that we're maintaining a very flat approach to your total levy. You can see that next year it's projected to drop down to $9.9 million. A lot of that is due to the decreased interest rate that we received, but it's providing a lot of flexibility for Steve and the school board to not be required to pay principal, but to manage that local property tax levy with an unknown state budget and some of the things that are certainly coming down the pipe that nobody can necessarily predict. So with that, be happy to answer any questions if there are any before you consider the formal resolutions this evening.
And Eric, I think one point I'll make about this structure is really the key word is flexibility for the school board. You're able to take out a borrowing today at the rates that Eric just showed you with the flexibility after 1 year to meet the financial goals of the board and the community moving forward. As an example, this past fall, we lowered the tax rate to try to achieve as consistent of school property taxes as we could across the community. We've seen some very positive results with looking at actual tax bills from that strategy this past fall. As we move forward, this flexibility will give the school board the ability to react to the state budget, right? So at this point in time, we're going into a state budget cycle, but it's important for us to be able to keep our eye on the property tax levy and the impact on the community. So the flexibility that this borrowing does provide to the school board lets us react to what we see from the state budget. As an example, Eric mentioned the school board could opt to pay more. If, as an example, there's an increase in state equalization aid that would cause us to have some flexibility to pay down additional debt, that flexibility would be there. So it's just important to know that we'll be bringing this topic back to the budget committee to continue to look at the topic of property tax levy management, keeping a consistent property tax levy in the community, and the flexibility that the board has to react to information as it comes throughout the spring. In your packet from last week, you saw a draft resolution. It was a draft because the sale took place today. We did receive the final resolution late this afternoon, which we're able to put in the packet. So you have that in there as well. We did include the full ratings report for anyone who really wants to take a look at it. You're welcome to. So we've got quite a bit of information there. Eric is certainly welcome or is willing to answer any detailed questions you have. But I'll turn it over to you, Joan, for any comments or questions from the board members.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the sale today. It seemed to have gone quite well. Thank you, Eric. Any questions before we make a motion, or I ask for a motion for that resolution?
I make the motion to pass it.
Second.
Second, any other questions or concerns for anybody? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, and thank you, Steve and Eric, for all you're doing for them. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you. So, I just want to go back to what we passed in the consent agenda. Part of what we passed in the consent agenda was Randy's letter to retire. And I just want to make a few comments. We have approved that, and I certainly support that and want to thank him for all that he has done for our district. And I know Amy and Kate are listening. I want to thank Amy and the girls for all the sacrifices that the whole family has made. Being a superintendent to a school is time-consuming and demanding, and it takes a whole family to sacrifice and make it the way you have done it, Randy. And I truly, truly appreciate and want to thank you and your family for what you have done for that. So thank you. Randy has done huge things for our district, from long-range planning to the wonderful buildings that we're going to have with his leadership here. He makes wonderful decisions, but I think every decision he makes, he talks about what's best for kids. And again, I think that's a statement of a true, genuine leader in education. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. So I have an official press release that I would like to pass out, that in the Annie Blackburn kind of.
Just to clarify, it's not till the end of next year.
Oh, no, we have time with him
We got
yet,
some
so
time.
thank you. But with that note, I do appreciate the lead time Randy has given us. We have 18 months to look at that process. And to begin that process, I don't want to really miss any steps. And one of the steps that I feel we are gifted with, knowing before we go to convention next week, is that we have this in our future. So one thing that would help me, and if anybody else has any other directives, I would love to have Brian, if he could pull this together, maybe get the board members who are going to convention, other districts who have done a recent search, I think would help us as we kind of, make connections in the school board convention. And if there are any search firms that might be down there that you could point us to, that would help. And I know we're leaving next week, so getting that material to us, maybe through Rebecca, or could help us.
Sure, absolutely. And so I'll just email it directly to the board members attending, a list of that.
Okay.
When you say school districts, do you want to kind of stick with our Dane County, our CISA?
I would like
spread it wider?
Our peer group, I think.
Our peer group,
Okay,
comparable
sure, okay.
districts to
Yep.
us, that size-wise, that have done the search. Is that
Yep, absolutely.
kind of where we're at?
And I'll email that by the end of the week to everyone. So.
That would be
Well,
perfect.
there's
So-
one session for sure, I don't know if there's more, but I found one that addresses the issue of transition for searching for a new superintendent.
Good. So I think next week is a great time to just begin the process, the thinking about what we want as a process. Do we want to do this as a full board? Do we want to set up some special meetings as we define that process? Do we want to do it through a committee, like an HR committee, to dig into some of the background and bring it to the board? And they aren't decisions we need to make tonight, but I think we need to think about how it is we want to go down the path of beginning the process. So, maybe Brian, if you can kind of kick off with some names and places, and if there's any other board member that wants information at this point or has any thoughts that you want to share. anyway, Randy, it's been wonderful, and I applaud you for doing it. It'll be change is hard, but I'm happy for you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So with that, we still have to set up some meetings, I think.
Yes, we do. Let me start off with, at the end of the month here, and I don't, Rebecca, did we approve the special meeting on the 30th?
Yes, we approved
Yes.
both the January.
Did we approve our location for it? Okay, I'm gonna, we've approved the meeting, the location will be at the high school. So for the special meeting at the end of the month on the 30th of January, that's for our curriculum presentations, that'll be at the high school, so they'll just clarify that.
And can you clarify the time again?
4:30 to 6:30.
Okay.
I think the next piece we're looking for are two of our committee meetings, the Budget Committee and Facilities. They each probably need about an hour and a half, so I probably can't stack them back to back. Steve, you were looking at early February, is that what your preference was?
If possible, the week prior to the board meeting or the week before.
So we're looking at the week of the 6th for a Budget Committee and a Facilities Committee. Potentially, I know we've been trying to do some morning meetings, like a 7:30 to 9 for each of those. Is that what you're looking at, Steve?
I can make that work or after work for folks too,
Yep.
whatever works.
I'm flexible.
Flexible.
So you're looking at, what are those dates again?
Morning school.
The week of the 6th would be one option
Of February?
of February, or if that's not available, the week before.
So that's just, which one do you want to go first, Steve?
So why don't we do facilities, which for sure will be, need to be an hour and a half.
All right, so why don't we do, what about the,
Can we stay away from Tuesday?
sure. What about Monday, the 6th? For facilities, that's 7:30 in the morning?
7:30? Mm-hmm.
Does that work, Steve?
Yeah,
And then
7:30 to 9.
facilities? Works, okay. And then budget?
Does Wednesday work, Jeff? The 8th?
yes, it does.
Mark, 8th?
Same time?
7:30 to 9 on the 8th?
Yep.
That's fine for me.
That's good for me.
All right. Good, so we have facilities on February 6th at 7:30 a.m. and we have budget at 7:30 a.m. on February 8th. Okay, so those two are good. All right. Next items I want to look, we did the curriculum presentations. You had talked about wanting to look at an evaluation
Yes,
meeting.
the evaluation meeting, which probably should be around that beginning of April, and I know Judy is going to be gone on the 12th, right?
13th through the 27th.
Yeah, so I'd like to do it before that, while we still have Brian reviewing our current. Could we do it the first before our April meeting, like the 5th or 6th of April? Get it done earlier this
Sure.
year? Either night, Wednesday the 5th? What time?
Wednesday doesn't work for me.
Wednesday doesn't work? How about Thursday the 6th?
That works.
April 6th?
What time?
April 6th.
5:30? Jack, does that work for you?
5:30 works. What's the date again?
6th.
April
April
6th,
6th.
5:30 for our evaluation, summary, prioritizing meeting.
Okay.
And that'll be
Okay.
here?
And then the last item I think I have is then looking at our community engagement meeting. So this would be one that we do in the evening. Lisa would be part of leading that and her team. I don't want to get too late in the year, so I'm considering a time in March before spring break. Spring break starts on the 17th and runs through the 26th. So our board meeting that week, or that month, is on the 13th. Wondering about like March 6th. be a Monday. That work for you, Lisa? Okay.
I'm good with that.
And we could do like a 6:30 start, and then I told Lisa we planned it around like a 2-hour time frame, a 6:30 to 8:30. Okay, great.
What's this meeting?
That's the
Community engagement, where we invite 10 people in, so now that we have that date.
So this would be 6:30 to 8:30 on March 6th.
So because of that being on March 6th, maybe we should have those 10 people by our February meeting.
Yes, if we could have your list of your 10 people to us by the February meeting, then we can.
Then we can have a formal invite sent to them.
Can you tell me again what the qualification to what you're looking for in these 10
I
people?
think we're just trying to get kind of representative of the community to be, I mean, these are really meant to be community engagement meetings.
About the school?
No, this is about social emotional learning and student mental health. That's the topic. So think about the ones we did like last year where we did them in the PAC. I think what Lisa and I have discussed is we'd like this to be more of an interactive piece as opposed to a sit and get. So we'd like to not do it at the PAC, and we'd like to do it in some classrooms at one of the buildings. We'll determine that as we kind of plan it out. But I think as we've opened these up to the public, we just haven't had a lot of attendance. So I think our thought is if we could have everybody invite 10 people, that would at least give us some, and all of you represent different people in the community and know different people. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what we're looking for.
good. March 6th.
And then I have on mine from Rebecca, we have a DEI in January.
Yes, we have one, I think, right.
23rd.
23rd at 5:30
I'm going to be out of town.
that week.
No, Monday and Tuesday, I'm flying out on Monday night, back on late Tuesday, so I'd be available Wednesday.
Do you guys want, we have this one scheduled already. In the past, when someone tried to make a committee meeting, you have had a sub. Do you want to try a
Yeah.
sub?
Just a minute.
I'm happy to attend.
Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, we'll just keep that, then we'll reschedule that. The other question I had, and this is one that we just, there was a conversation about having student listening sessions again this winter, spring. But I think we were looking at doing that after the forum with the students, was that right?
Yes.
So I think at one point we had kind of shared that we were going to do it in February, but so that we're not going to do it in February, we'll be doing it after that forum that we get
And do
sponsored.
we have a date for that one?
No.
Tim, do you recall if we have a date for the high school forum?
It is most likely to be, I've got to look up the date, it's going to be the Friday morning before spring break. The rationale for that
Yep.
is that it's a day that students could participate without missing class. Now, it would mean if families have travel plans on that date, that will trip a few, but that was the student request.
You're looking at the 17th, that morning, that,
And it is St. Patrick's Day.
yep, there you go. So 17th of March. All right, very good. Those were,
Okay.
Can I get a HR committee meeting?
sorry.
Oh,
You're back,
HR.
Trying to
Brian.
leave you behind. If we could do something that first week in February, it's the 6th through the 10th, some point in there. And again, can make time of day that works for the committee.
I'm open.
Yeah, HR would be Judy, Joan, and Brian.
Well, we already have Monday and Wednesday. Could we do Thursday,
The 9th?
the 9th?
Thursday, you have the 9th. No, the 2nd we have curriculum.
Could we do like a 7:30 start? Would that
Yep.
work?
On February 9th. Is that what you're talking, Brian?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah,
Yep.
okay. 7:30.
Very good.
It's a lot of 7:30 meetings that week.
So that's-
Okay.
Again, a general reminder to all the committees that some of you are going to be, it's an ongoing thing that's not going to finish this year, but most of us, the committees, hopefully you can finish your response to the DEI recommendations by the end of March, so we still have a month or two to look at them.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Mark. The last item I have is just with regards to those going to convention next week. Rebecca and I will send out an itinerary where it'll have who's going, what days they're going to be there, our contact information, and what our schedule is for each day, so that you have kind of a walking. So we'll get that together and get it out to you by the end of the week.
Steve, are you still doing a van on?
I am, but I have to be there early because I'm coordinating the school finance puzzle on Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's one of the pre-convention workshops. So if someone's going to a pre-convention workshop, the timing will work out. Or if someone's wanting to hang out a little bit.
What time are you going to?
I have to be there by like noon.
So you would need to leave by 10-ish?
Yeah. So it might be too early, but anyone is welcome to come with.
We'll get back to you.
You can sneak into the school finance puzzle. Is that appealing?
Well, I am going to go to a afternoon session, so, are you going to come right back on Friday? Or are you going to
I'll
stay?
come back on Friday.
Friday? Okay. We'll talk about that. All right, any other questions, concerns? If not, I think
Motion to
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Wow,
Thanks, everybody.
8:30. Jack, did Jack leave already? We got a lot to sign.
I would like.
Is that 99 million?